Combination of both of those states' demographical background, but a state that also introduces an Asian element to the situation. Atlanta is the highway hub of the Deep South, and thus it is known as one of the largest drug trafficking corridors in the country. But recently, Atlanta has seen a surge in scamming as well as an influx of international criminal syndicates that are focused not just on trafficking and street level activities, but also on economical crimes. Usually, when we think about street gangs, we immediately associate it with activity on the streets, hand-to-hand transactions, and trafficking. However, in the state of Georgia, there are much more elaborate criminal syndicates. DTOs, or drug trafficking organizations, are only a fraction of the street criminal activity that has to do with organized crime. Credit card fraud, insurance fraud, fencing of stolen merchandise, and auto theft rings are other types of criminal activities that make part of the criminal underworld. Apart from Houston, Atlanta is the most diverse city in the South. Georgia's landscape is diverse when it comes to the reasons why people are joining gangs. And on today's video, we're going to look at the top 10 most gang-plagued cities in the state of Georgia. If you look at our channel's logo, you'll notice that the state of Georgia is featured prominently on our logo right next to the state of Florida. So I want to thank all my subscribers from Georgia for being supportive. Georgia has always been a huge part of our YouTube channel's growth, and I'm glad to have you here on our channel. Typically, gangs form for a variety of reasons. It usually comes from places that are poverty-stricken and where opportunities are limited. However, gangs also arise from situations where there's racial discrimination. Take the case of the gang culture in California. The famous Salvatruchas, a Salvadorian gang originated to defend a Salvadorian community that was a minority amongst minorities and being bullied. They went on to become a fierce bully themselves. And today, most people in the United States would fear to harass or bother a Salvadorian, knowing very well what could come with that program. Most Salvadorians are good, hardworking people, but you would be well advised not to ever mess with Salvadorians because of their gang's fierce reputation. And thus, it's no secret that when you harass people, they click up. And when they click up, they form gangs to protect their communities. Take the example of Detroit, Michigan. It is predominantly an African-American city. However, most of the graffiti that you're going to find is going to be related to white gangs. Seems like nothing toughens you up more than being the underdog. The vast majority of gang activity, however, are individuals who think that they're going to get something as far as street respect or credibility from joining these organizations. However, there's only two ways out: in a coffin or in a prison. Number 10 is Doraville. This is a suburb on the northeast side of Atlanta that has a nice variety of population, a large Latino, Asian community here. In 2021, this neighborhood made world headlines as hate attacks on Asians in Georgia. We saw the lives of 8 people lost in this community by random attacks targeting Asian businesses. The man who perpetrated these attacks went on to serve life in prison, and the footage that we're looking at was recorded the day before this event took place. At the time, I lived in Montgomery, Alabama, and it was just a 2-hour drive from the ATL. This region is plagued with a very strong anti-Asian sentiment. Kia and Hyundai plants are located in this area, and you have a lot of very affluent, professional Korean engineers. And in a poverty-stricken area, they're jealous. Why do these Koreans get to drive these brand new Mercedes-Benzes and BMWs when I'm poor? Well, maybe because they went to college. Maybe because they got an education. Maybe because they learned how to read and write. As we know, discrimination is a leading cause for communities to click up and form organizations that unavoidably many times turn out being nothing more than gangs. And with a strong anti-Asian sentiment in Georgia, which some individuals have even taken it upon themselves to make random attacks on this community, it's understandable that the neighborhood is going to click up and they're going to strong form community alliances and that means that this area has a lot of gang activity. The Hispanic community here is large as well, and they're also facing the same circumstance. Atlanta is a gang-infected city, and it's no surprise that the Asian and Hispanic suburbs are going to have a huge gang problem as well. On our recent gang videos, I'm already seeing this comment come up quite often, that it's usually the black areas that have gangs, or it's usually the minority areas that have a lot of gangs. But in reality, we see in areas where whites are the minority, that they're actually the ones that are more propense to join gangs. Take the city where I live in Bradenton, Florida. A lot of the homeless population here is gang affiliated. This poor, white, vulnerable community lives in a Hispanic and black area. Thus, most of the homeless people that are white are going to have some type of gang affiliation for protection. In central Alabama, where there's a large black population, you see more white hate groups and white gangs. In reality, it's no different. Whatever the marginalized group, whatever the most vulnerable community is in an area, they're the ones that are going to be more propense to join gangs. In some places, it's the Native American populations. In some places, it's the Asians. In some places, it's the whites or the blacks. It all comes down to who is the marginalized group. And in much of the states that we're talking about, the marginalized groups are African Americans or migrant communities, so they're the ones that are going to be more propense to end up in gangs. Number 9 is Valdosta, Georgia. Located along Interstate 75, it is the first large city in Georgia when you're heading out of the state of Florida. Valdosta is an impoverished area with very little opportunity, very little industry outside of agriculture, which means that poverty here reigns king. Part of the Deep South, this area has a long-seated history of discrimination against its African American communities. Thus, the blacks here have lower income analytics, lower percentage of home ownership, and thus are going to be naturally more propense to gang activity. A very economically deprived area where poultry, agriculture, peanuts, and other horrible industries in agriculture provide very little sources of income that are ever going to be generationally changing the lives of the people here. Thus, there really isn't too much to look for living in Valdosta, Georgia, other than poverty and a lot of crime. And gang membership here is disappointingly very common. Number 8 is Savannah, Georgia. Typically, when we think about Savannah, Georgia, we might think it's a beautiful city with beautiful culture, a beautiful coastline, and of course, a port city with good industry. The Georgia coast along the Atlantic is a fast-growing and prosperous region. Even people that live in the nicer side of Savannah may be completely unaware of what's happening in the worst parts of their city. There's a few famous celebrities from this town who have pretty much put on blast the gang culture that's prevalent in this city, and if you watch their exploits, it's back-to-back shootings, back-to-back problems, and we're starting to see that Savannah, Georgia, despite being a beautiful city, has another side to it that most of us will never get to see, including some of the people that live here. The situation in Savannah is similar to what we talked about in our Alabama video, places where you have a growing population of people moving in, but then you have the locals who, some way or another, don't benefit from all the growth and prosperity moving into their hometown. Number 7 is Augusta, Georgia. And this may be a surprise to a lot of people as well, but if you're familiar with this city and its surrounding suburbs, you understand that there's a few problems in this area. And just driving around the city, you can tell that crime is definitely popping off here. Many of the locals call Augusta Disgusta. Now, I would personally never say that about that town because the people that I've met here have been genuinely awesome to me, and I actually have a few businesses here that I enjoy going to, so I personally have no problem with this city. And in fact, there's a few videos I want to make next time I go to this city. Like there's a suburb called Martinez that was founded by Hispanic families. Thus, there's so much more that I want to learn about this city. I really enjoy going to it, but we can't deny that there's a lot of problems here, and many of the outskirts of the city and inner city neighborhoods are plagued with a lot of gang activity. It may not be the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the city, but if you spend enough time here, you'll realize that gangs are a huge problem, and the city is also close to the South Carolina border. The state of South Carolina has one of the largest gang and crime problems of any other state. In fact, some analytical reviews consider South Carolina to be the state with the highest crime rate in the country. Now, I'm not really a fan of believing crime indexes. I like to stick to things like murder rates because they're much more difficult analytics to manipulate by local governments who want to cover up or distort the reality of their crime rates. But if you look at South Carolina's murder rate and you look at their highway fatality rates, they're the most dangerous roads in the whole country, you can start to see that this area really is plagued with a lot of problems. Number 6 is East Point in College Park. Located in southwest Atlanta, this region of the metropolitan area is just plagued with crime and criminal activity. Predominantly African American gangs are here, and they're always shooting it out for some reason or another. One of our subscribers who lives out here recently made a comment saying that you hear gunshots every single night here. This area just to the north of the Atlanta airport is nothing more than an urban mess with different subdivisions that really should all be part of Atlanta city limits, but somehow they're considered suburbs. It's a disorientating mess of subdivisions. Some are newer, some are housing projects. Atlanta is one of the most sprawling cities in America, and its city limits and suburbs go far out. A city that's really hard to define in a lot of ways because its boundaries of its metropolitan area extend in so many directions. It's somewhat confusing, but I can guarantee you that if you end up near East Point or College Park, you are definitely in one of the most crime-ridden regions of the entire state of Georgia. And gangs are prevalent here. Number 5 is Gwinnett County. Now this list was about cities, and Gwinnett County is a whole county. And it's mostly a suburban county, but it has the most ethnic diversity of anywhere else in the South outside of Houston, Texas. Thus, Gwinnett County is a very diverse place. And being a suburban place, there's high incomes and a lot of money. And that has attracted a lot of criminal organizations from out the entire world to set base here. Clearly, we're not just talking about street activity. We're talking about international crime syndicates. We're talking about theft and fraud rings, money laundering rings. If it's crime related and it's global, chances are there's some type of organization here in Gwinnett County that has something to do with it. Lawrenceville being the largest city here, so if we had to get technical, we could say Lawrenceville, but in reality, most of Gwinnett County and its suburban sprawl of Atlanta has a lot of criminal activity. It may not be displayed in the typical ways you'd think about when you think about street gangs, but believe me, in all of this suburban mess, money from all over the world moves in very mysterious ways. And if we were going to go by sheer number of individual organizations, then this would definitely be the largest concentration in the state. Number 4 is Columbus, Georgia. Located on the border between Alabama and Georgia, this region of the state is impoverished, full of crime, full of gangs. There's literally no opportunity here, and most of the people that are moving here end up moving here because of a military job. I had a conversation with somebody here who worked for the military, and they told me that if you can survive in Columbus, Georgia, you're pretty much ready for any war zone in any country. The murder rates are high, the crime rate is high, this place is always popping off. It is definitely one of the crappiest places you can live in Georgia, and gangs play a huge role in the violence here. Alabama's criminal laws against drugs are stronger than Georgia's. Thus, Columbus is like a staging ground to push everything into rural Alabama. Criminal organizations, predominantly African American groups, are going to be fighting for control of this city constantly. The cityscape here is run down and falling apart, and the back of businesses are usually covered in gang graffiti. Most of the rural countryside surrounding Columbus has also been falling apart over the decades. Because of its geographical location, it is deeply entrenched in with the history of the past, slavery, cotton, and finally the civil rights movement. Every passing decade and every passing period of time leaves this area more and more hateful, more and more distraught. It's a region that's future is plagued by the past. The dependency on government benefits like Section 8 housing has created a generational culture of poverty that ultimately leads to gang activity. Sadly, It's like a way of life for people here. Number 3 is Albany, Georgia. Now, this city has one of the largest gang problems of any city in the South, period. Well documented in popular culture, despite the fact that I've done a few videos showing the absolute worst parts of this city, somehow I get nothing but love out of Albany, Georgia. So if you're watching from Albany, I'm going to send you a huge hug and thank you for supporting our channel. These people really are a talented group of people. And every time I go here, despite the fact the city has a lot of problems, I've got nothing but love back out of the city, which is unexplainable to me since I've done nothing but show all the crappy things that are wrong with their town. So thank you, Albany, Georgia, for liking me somehow, despite the fact I've just shown the absolute worst of your city. Field Mob, Paula Deen, Ray Charles. This city has given the world some awesome things. Thank you, Albany, Georgia, but yeah, it's totally gang infected. Number 2 is Macon, Georgia. And let me just say that Macon, Georgia per capita would have clearly been number 1. The only reason it's not number 1 is because we all know Atlanta's a larger city. But if we're going to go per capita, there's no other place in Georgia with a larger gang problem. Macon, Georgia is absolutely filled with gangs. And these are like California type African American street gangs. They upload videos of all their events to the internet, even though the state of Georgia has a RICO state law, which means that it would be very easy for the state to just wrap them all up and finish the problem easily, since they're uploading videos to the internet showing the entire world what they're doing. Crazy. But the city of Macon, Georgia is absolutely synonymous with gang culture on a degree that is comparable to what you have in the state of California. It is just entrenched in the lifestyle of this city. At least Atlanta has some good things going for it. But in Macon, Georgia, the only thing going on here is straight up gangbanging. I made some videos showing the gang activity in gang neighborhoods in Macon, Georgia, and I actually had a lot of people from Macon try to extort me over the video, saying that it was their neighborhood, it was their intellectual property. But you know what I did? I went back to Macon, Georgia, and I looked at all the money I ever made in Macon through all my videos, and I gave it back to hospitality workers when I was there to just make them understand, hey, I don't need anything from you. Last time I went to Macon, Georgia, literally every dollar I ever made in this city, I gave it back as tips to hospitality workers. They were trying to say that I was taking advantage of their city and exploiting them for money. So sure, I gave it back, but not to the criminals. I gave it to the people that are working, the servers, the people that were cleaning my hotel room when I stayed there. I gave it back to the people that are actually making Macon a better place. And you know, they were so thankful and they were so happy that I gave them these large tips. You could really see the appreciation in their faces. In every city, you have people that are doing great things for their community, and you have people that are destroying their communities. And sadly, when it comes to Macon, Georgia, there are so many people here just trying to hold everybody back. Hey, they thought they could hold me back for making a video in their city, and I don't even live there. Man, were they mistaken. Hey, but you in my city, dawg. You can't make money in my city, dawg. So I said, how much real estate do you own in your city, dawg? And they're like, well, no, I don't really own anything, dawg. I stay with my mama crib, dawg. I just got out, dawg. And I said, well, you don't own Macon, Georgia. No, the Macon Housing Authority owns Georgia, you know. Some Chinese guy that bought all the rental units owns Macon, Georgia. You sleep in your mama's basement. You don't own Macon, Georgia. You own your city when you own the real estate. You have to physically own the buildings. Just because you do graffiti on the side of a building doesn't mean it's yours. It's whoever wrote their name on the title of that piece of land, okay? Because there's always people like, you in my city, dawg. You in my hood, dawg. I'm like, no. You in your mama's basement. You know, the landlord. The old white guy in a Cadillac that comes pick up that paycheck, he owns Macon, Georgia. You don't own Macon, Georgia. You own it if you buy it. But if you're living in Section 8 housing, it's not your hood, dawg. It's Macon Housing Authority, dawg. I mean, if the Macon Housing Authority wanted me to get a slice of the pie from me, I guess they could, but I don't see them trying that on me yet. We don't get down like that in Florida. We got a sheriff here in Florida named Grady Judd. You know what he does to you? When you get locked up, he sends one of his sheriff's officers to go on a date with your baby mama while you're locked up, and then sends you photos in the prison like, hey, while you were locked up, one of my boys was taking your baby mama on a date. And you know what? He's got a better job than you. Better future, better benefits. A lot of criminals in Polk County, Florida have actually lost their baby mamas to the sheriff's office in their single male department. So we get down a whole different way in Florida, guys. So no, that whole thing ain't gonna work on us, man. You know what they need in Macon, Georgia? They need Grady Judd. That's what Macon, Georgia needs. Or just to evacuate the few people who have a job and just let some horrific natural disaster of some sort take place here. I don't know. The place is really hopeless. The number one stunner, the what? Number one is Atlanta, Georgia. Everybody knew that because it's the largest city in the state of Georgia, and it is absolutely filled with crime. Atlanta's a great city. I absolutely love going to Atlanta. It really is an awesome city full of culture that's influenced the entire world. But dang it, do they have a gang problem in Atlanta. And it's no longer just street criminals. They are getting smart. We got scammers. We have credit card fraud. We have international crime rings. I mean, Atlanta, Georgia has really diversified their criminal activity lately. So I think it was the last time that I stayed in Atlanta. I stayed at a hotel near the airport. Now, I usually stay at pretty nice hotels, but for some reason, hotels were like $500 a night. So I only wanted to spend like $250, which is still a lot of money for a hotel. It wasn't going to get me the best hotel money could buy. We stayed at a hotel. It was a newer hotel. It wasn't like decrepit. It was like maybe a Marriott or a Hyatt or something. I don't remember what it was. It was a new hotel. It wasn't a bad hotel at all. It just wasn't $500 a night. We literally said our goodbyes to our vehicle when we parked it outside the hotel because we did not know if the next day in the morning our car was going to be there. The entire night we heard car alarms going off in the hotel parking lot, one after the other. Even though there were 2 police cars stationed right in front of the hotel, it did not stop people from car checking and probably carjacking several vehicles that were parked outside of this hotel. How our car was still there at the end of the night, I have no freaking idea. Just getting off at a gas station in Atlanta, Georgia makes you wonder how bad do you really need gas. The city really has a huge gang violence problem as well. It's a very active city, and I don't know how Atlanta manages to keep their crime analytics looking so good on paper, because if you've ever gone to Atlanta, you know it's completely active. A lot of people that are moving to Southwest Florida are coming from the Atlanta area, and it's not that they don't like their city. It's a great city. It's a fun place to be, but at some point or another, you're either going to get carjacked, shot outside a gas station, or who knows what type of illicit activity you're going to be a victim of. Atlanta is just crime-ridden, and unfortunately, a lot of the crime is very well organized. Atlanta is also a highway and distribution hub, which means that there's large-scale criminal activity taking place here undoubtedly simply because of its importance as a distribution center and a highway hub as well. But beyond all of its difficulties, it's still an amazing city, and most of us pretty much knew it was going to be number one. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's video, and if there's a city or area in Georgia that you think should have made today's